Hey, this is Tom from MVP Chess. Welcome back to my series on Bobby Fischer's Seminal Work, My 60 Memorable Games. In this video, we'll be analyzing game number 43 that Fischer played versus Samuel Reshevsky in the U.S. Championship in 1962. You're not going to want to miss this matchup between the GOAT and the old warrior. Before we jump in, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and join Team MVP. Thank you so much for your support. So, back in game 26, 27, and 28, we analyzed three games from the Reshevsky-Fischer match that took place in New York, Los Angeles, sponsored by the Piatigorsky family. That match ended in a draw and a lot of controversy, including Fischer walking out, lawsuits. Be sure to check out that controversy if you missed it. This game, as Fischer calls it, is the missing link, the de facto tiebreaker. This was the first time they met since that match. So let's see what happened. Fischer with the white pieces, Reshevsky playing black. Of course, Bobby plays e4, best by test. And we have a Sicilian on the board, open Sicilian. And Reshevsky goes for the Najdorf. All right, so we saw a couple games ago when Fischer played Miguel Najdorf in the Najdorf variation. He opted for the variation pawn to h3, so he decides to repeat this line versus Reshevsky. Now, Reshevsky responds in a really great way, according to Fischer. Pawn to g6. So Reshevsky's idea is, okay, you played pawn to h3. I'm going to transpose into a quasi-Sicilian dragon variation where the move h3 is misplaced. Because the most testing variation against the Sicilian dragon, which is the Yugoslav attack, white wants to push this h-pawn to h4 in one move. So black's argument is white is a tempo down in this variation, so it's not as dangerous. Bishop g7 after g4, and Fischer keeps expanding on the king side. The knight comes to h5 only temporarily. Fischer looks to break this blockade, but Reshevsky has a nice resource in this position. e5, gaining a foothold in the center, and then slamming the knight down on to the f4 square. Now, Reshevsky would be extremely happy if Fischer took this knight, because all of a sudden this dragon bishop is a fire-breathing monster. Of course, Fischer does not want to go for that. Instead, he plays knight d5, looking to exchange off this active knight, and recapture on d5 with the piece. Both players continue with development, knight c6, and bishop g4 here. So Fischer voluntarily accepting doubled pawns on the king side, but these double pawns give Fischer an open h-file and a target on h7 to work with in the middle of the game. Reshevsky plays queen c8, crafty move, attacking the pawn on g4 and also threatening knight b4. So nice multi-purpose move here. So Fischer has to retreat the queen to d1 to defend both threats. And after knight d4, Fischer accepts another set of doubled pawns. Okay, so for those of you who are really reluctant to take these on and don't fully understand the positional merits of double pawns, this is a great game to analyze because Fischer's rooks get a lot of activity because of this pawn structure. Notice the rook on a1, the rook on h1, they're both in the game, whereas Reshevsky's rooks are lacking activity. Queen e6, and Fischer immediately makes use of the half-open a file, rook a5, taking control over the d5 square, nice move. After f6, Fischer goes in for this rook and minor piece ending where he's got some clear targets to attack. This pawn on d6, this pawn on h7. Conversely, Reshevsky doesn't have much to target in Fischer's position. So whose pawn structure is worse, right? Fischer may have two sets of doubled pawns, but Reshevsky's the one with weaknesses. Reshevsky's pieces are less active. King d7, Fischer captures here and of course plays g5. Great move. Fixing this pawn on h7 as a long-term weakness. Bishop e7, and Fischer completes his development with king e2 and bishop e3. Really nice. After rook c8, Fischer begins with b4, taking control over the c5 square and looking to expand on the queen side next with c4 and really start squeezing Reshevsky. So the old warrior feels compelled to play b5 in this position, preventing c4, but of course, this does create another weakness on a6. So I've highlighted all of these backward pawns in Reshevsky's position, a6, d6, h7. You know, we've heard about the principle of 2 weaknesses in the endgame. This is a principle of 3 weaknesses. Reshevsky is not going to be able to defend all 3 of these points. So Fischer is looking really, really good in this position. So the rook has done its job on the d5 square. Fischer brings it back to d1 so it can quickly shift to the a file or maybe double up on the h file depending on circumstances. King e6, rook a1, targeting this pawn. We have rook c6, and then rook h3. So Fischer really playing on both sides of the board, and is now ready at a moment's notice to play rook ah1, a double stack, and looking to pressure this h7 pawn. We have bishop f8 and rook ah1, rook c7. So Reshevsky holding things together for the time being, but after this simple move, rook h4, okay, black is basically in zugzwang. And all of these pieces I've highlighted, they can't move. It would either result in the loss of a pawn or they're just straight illegal. So what does Reshevsky do in this position? He decides to try to liquidate one of these weaknesses, the backwards pawn on d6. This is often a key break in the Sicilian for black, pawn to d5, so it's a very logical move. Now, this was not the game continuation, but if Fischer grabs on d5 immediately, and I'm sure this is what Reshevsky had calculated, Reshevsky is actually able to hold the balance. Rook d1, rook d8, and then a nice move here, bishop g7. And after this capture, notice this rook on c7 would defend the h7 pawn. So then Reshevsky might have pretty good drawing chances. But Fischer finds a really nice in-between move, rook a1, forcing the rook to the c6 square. Okay, now it no longer defends h7. So now and only now, Fischer grabs on d5, gives this check, and brings the rook to d8. So now bishop g7 would just simply fail to rook takes, bishop takes, and rook takes h7. So Reshevsky plays king f5. Notice this rook on h4 is doing a really nice job of restricting the king from advancing. So that was nice foresight by Fischer, bringing the rook to h4. Rook a8. So Fischer pressuring both of these weak pawns. Rook e6. All Reshevsky can do at this point is just wait. We have rook h3. And Reshevsky needs to get his rook into the game. He needs to get some activity. So he decides, okay, enough's enough. I'll let you have the pawn on h7. And at least I'm not so bottled up. So Fischer is now up a pawn. We have rook f7, king g4, and f3. Now, after king g3, Fischer said the tournament hall was buzzing because apparently they realized that this move, king f1 and bishop f2, would have ended in swift victory for Fischer. Fischer didn't play king f1. He decided to play king d3 instead. This is still completely winning. It just takes a little bit longer. So Reshevsky, again, because his pieces are so passive, he decides to just jettison this pawn to get this bishop on the long diagonal active and into the game. So Fischer's now up 2 pawns and challenges the bishop on the long diagonal. King takes g5 in this position is not really possible because after rook g1, the pawn on g6 is a goner, and this is just really easy to convert. So Reshevsky thought it would be more testing to play bishop e5. Fischer steps out of the pin, king e3. And after bishop e7, rook g1, king h4, and king f3, Fischer starting to make progress with the king and is going to look to advance this past e-pawn. Simple as that. So rook d7, pawn to e5. Reshevsky gives a check. and Fischer starts to push. Reshevsky tries to blockade this pawn with the bishop, but that's to no avail. The dark square bishop can challenge here. And after this series of captures, Fischer's king infiltrates the position. The passed e-pawn is nearly to the promotion square. So after rook f2, I will turn it over to you for the last move of the game. White to play and win. What is the best move for white to play in this position? If you're new to rook and pawn endings or you need a refresher, this is a great position to study. Pause your videos. Okay. Of course, Fischer played rook e1 in this position. Good job if you found this move. After rook e1, Reshevsky resigned. Rooks belong behind passed pawns, whether you are the one pressing or the one defending. This is the position that you want them in. So the rook on e1 does a really nice job of preventing rook e2. It's going to escort the passed pawn to the promotion square on e8. Notice Fischer's king, and this is a key thing in the position, is that this cluster of pawns on b2, c3, and b4 provide really nice safe haven for Fischer's king. Okay, if Reshevsky starts, for example, delivering rear checks, Fischer's king can come forward, and this pawn on c3 acts as a nice shield or umbrella from these checks. So there's no salvation in rear checks from the rook for Reshevsky. So after rook e1, Reshevsky resigned. Let's leave this final position on the board. What a game by Fischer. So Fischer won the match tiebreaker, the unofficial tiebreaker, with a really convincing victory. Reshevsky played really well in the opening. That was kind of his weak point in the match, but he came well prepared, had a really nice line against Fischer, but just got outplayed positionally. Fischer did a really good job of accepting double pawns and understanding their strength, realizing that it was going to give a lot of activity for his rooks, and he was a really, really target conscious in this game. That's what I take away the most. Creating these weaknesses on a6, d6, h7, just stretching Reshevsky's defenses, and eventually broke. So I hope you really enjoyed this game. Don't forget, smash that subscribe button. Join Team MVP. You're not going to want to miss my next installment, which will be game number 44. Wow, we are getting there. Thank you so much for your support and being on Team MVP. I'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.